A very good afternoon to you, Simon. So what opportunity is there on the African continent when you look at real estate right now?
Afternoon, Mashudu. I think that the opportunity that's on the continent right now can really be summarized in one phrase, which for me is an extreme demand-supply mismatch. I think in our travels over the last 4 years, which is really the time period that we've spent looking seriously at this type of business, we've seen that things like an increasing rate of urbanization, growing consumerism, a burgeoning middle class, etc., have all resulted in a high demand for commercial property, and that demand obviously is going to take some time to be filled.
When you talk about high demand with commercial property, it's also the rise of the African consumer right now. But when you look at some of the challenges, what are some of the challenges do you face in terms of setting up a property or this commercial property in Africa right now?
I think that the challenges are many. The fund that we're involved in is specifically focused on development. We've been quite clear in terms of targeting specific jurisdictions, and the challenges that you face differ per region. I think it's one of the lessons that we've taken out of it is that Africa is obviously not homogenous. The main challenge, though, is obviously one that relates to timing. So there are absolutely processes in place to get land rights, to get planning permissions and the types of things that you need to kick a development off. What we do find, though, is that the time frame that one expects going in is very different to the time frame that one expects when you're actually in the thick of it.
You talk about your fund. What are the type of projects that are in the pipeline currently?
We've recently closed a fund, the RMB Westport Real Estate Development Fund. It's focused on Nigeria, Ghana and Angola specifically, and looking at commercial property development within those jurisdictions. The pipelines in all three jurisdictions are fairly good. There's a lot of deal flow. In fact, I think a lot of our time has gone into actually filtering that deal flow to make sure that the opportunities that we're looking at are high value opportunities and are de-risked as much as possible. The types of transactions that we're looking at depend, again, jurisdiction-wise, but a mixture of retail developments of shopping centres, as well as some office and some industrial parks that we're looking at as well.
Looking at investor appetite for African real estate, where is the investor base from when you're looking at the UK as well as the US and all the other regions?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We spent probably 2 years on the road looking for investors to come inside into the fund alongside RMB's capital, and we literally scoured the globe. It wasn't an easy exercise, and we saw a lot of demand initially coming out of the Middle East, very little out of the UK and Europe. And then what at the time was a bit surprising for us, but with hindsight maybe less so, was the demand that we saw coming out of the States and Canada. We didn't really actively tap the Far East, so can't comment too much on appetite from that.
And which jurisdictions are the international investors favouring right now?
I think that they're looking for jurisdictions first and foremost where they can get their minds around the risk. So jurisdictions where you can show them that there's acceptable land tenure in place, where you can show them that the expertise of the team that we've got with regards to mitigating development risk is relevant, are jurisdictions that they favour. Like I mentioned just now, Nigeria, Ghana and Angola are the jurisdictions on which we're focused, principally because of the underlying growth story, but also because they're jurisdictions in which we've got a track record and are comfortable operating.
Like you've got a fund, this RMB Westport Real Estate Development. Like, talk us through some of your experiences in terms of raising funds on the African continent and trying to get investments coming through for you.
I think quite eye-opening. At the time that we started looking for third-party funds to come in alongside our money, the stats that we were looking at was, I think, 12 cents in every dollar sought for private equity funds or private equity real estate funds globally. So quite difficult. I think that it's fair to say that Africa is a popular investment destination, but the gap between guys liking the concept and guys actually committing cold hard cash is a fairly big one to bridge. We spent a lot of time looking for select pockets of investors, some of the family offices, some of the sovereign wealth funds that were more familiar with investment on the continent.
Now looking at the new developments versus existing assets, where do you currently stand right now?
The RMB Westport Real Estate Development Fund is all focused on development opportunities. I think what we've seen is that the yields at which existing properties trade are fairly low, whereas the yields at which one can develop properties are reasonably high. We're probably looking at between 11 and 15% depending on the jurisdiction. So really in our minds and in the minds of our investors, the opportunity gap lies in developing properties to exit into the market later on.
But if you look at the South African property market, it's under a lot of pressure right now, and you compare it to the rest of Africa. How do we compare right now?
I think that yields in the South African property market are at all-time lows. So if you look at the market, it's run substantially in recent times. I think if you look at development yields in the South African market, they're probably between 2 and 6% lower than the development yields that we're seeing in these jurisdictions. There's obviously a differential because the risk profiles are different. So I don't think for 1 minute that we would be saying that the risk is something to be taken lightly. What we do focus on, though, is mitigating the risks in the jurisdictions in which we're active to try and get better risk-adjusted returns out of the transactions.
Well, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us, Simon Fifield. He's the head of investment banking and real estate at RMB.